Greetings again, curious wanderer. The walls of the warm tavern welcome you this evening. Windhelm is never warm, even behind its ancient walls. Even when the sky is clear and the wind stills for a time, the cold seems stitched into the stone. But here, in Candlehearth Hall, the chill relents. There's a fire in the hearth, steady and deep, and the scent of wood smoke and old pine hangs in the air like a comforting cloak. You can hear the murmur of voices, the clink of mugs, and the low, steady rhythm of a bard plucking at strings too old to be in tune, but too beloved to replace. After nights on the road, through frozen passes and quiet, snow-drowned woods, there is a peculiar joy in settling here. Boots thawing by the fire, hands wrapped around a warm cup. The kind of joy not loud or sudden, but slow and sure, like the feeling of a long-forgotten memory returning. Candlehearth Hall has stood for generations. Some say it was built as a monument to mourning. Others say it was raised as a gift to the people by a grieving son. Either way, it has become a place where stories live long after the voices that first told them have gone silent. And tonight, I've brought a story with me, a weighty one, full of flame and blood and consequence. I've been carrying this old book for some time. Its pages are brittle and creased, its cover worn soft by age and weather. It tells of a time not long past, though it feels like another age entirely, the days of the Oblivion crisis. There are few now who speak of it at length, though all remember it. The red sky, the great gates wrenched open in the very soil of Nirn, and the figure behind it all, Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric prince of destruction. This was no war of armies or banners. It was something older, more terrible. A sundering of the barrier between our world and the next. A time when oblivion itself poured into the streets of cities, and the air shimmered with fire. But before the gates, before the flames, there were whispers, cults, books bound in red leather, dreams filled with blood and stars. We'll begin there, with the mythic dawn, those strange and fervent servants of Dagon, and walk slowly forward into one of the most pivotal reckonings Tamriel has ever known. So, if you've the time, settle in, let the hearth do its work, let the mead warm your hands, and listen. This is the tale of fire that walked and the prince who brought it. This is the story of the Oblivion crisis, the influence that led to it, and the bloody aftermath. To understand Mehrunes Dagon's part in the chaos that came, we must first understand the shape of the shadow he casts. So now, by firelight, let's open to that old and thorny text. The one whispered in temple halls and half-burned in roadside shrines. The Daedra did not arrive with the crisis. They've always been watching, always circling just beyond the curtain. In the traditions of Morrowind, the Dunmer speak of four in particular, the most dangerous, the most unruly, the ones who test, who tempt, who destroy. They are known as the House of Troubles. Before we speak of the gates and the burning skies, it's worth stepping back, farther, deeper, into older myths, older fears. Let us read from the House of Troubles. Among the ancient ancestral spirits who accompanied Saint Veloth and the Chimer into the promised land of Morrowind, the four Daedra lords, Malakath, Mehrunes Dagon, Molag Bal, and Sheogorath, are known as the Four Corners of the House of Troubles. These Daedra lords rebelled against the counsel and admonition of the tribunal, causing great kinstrife and confusion among the clans and great houses. Malakath, Mehrunes Dagon, Molag Bal, and Sheogorath are holy in that they serve the role of obstacles during the testing. Through time, they have sometimes become associated with local enemies, like the Nords, Akaviri, or mountain orcs. Malakath is the reanimated dung that was Trinimac. Malakath is a weak but vengeful god. The Dark Elves say he is Malak, the god king of the orcs. He tests the Dunmer for physical weakness. Molag Bal is, in Morrowind, the king of rape. He tries to upset the bloodlines of houses and otherwise ruin the Dunmer gene pool. A race of monsters said to live in Molag Amur are the result of his seduction of Vivek during the previous era. Sheogorath is the king of madness. He always tests the Dunmer for mental weakness. In many legends, he is called upon by one Dunmer faction against another. In half of these stories, he does not betray those who called him, further confusing the issue of his place in the scheme of things. Can he help us? Is he not an obstacle? He is often associated with the fear other races have of the Dunmer, especially those who, like the Empire, might prove as useful allies. Mehrunes Dagon is the god of destruction. He is associated with natural dangers like fire, earthquakes, and floods. To some, he represents the inhospitable land of Morrowind. He tests the Dunmer will to survive and persevere. The worship of these four malevolent spirits is against the law and practice of the temple. However, the Four Corners seldom fail to discover those greedy, reckless, or mad enough to serve them. By ancient temple law and custom, and also by imperial law, the lives of witches and warlocks are forfeit, and imperial garrisons join ordinators and buoyant armigers of the temple in tracking down and destroying these foul covens in the wilderness refuges and ancient ruins where they conceal their profane worships. First page. This evil book was written by Mehrunes Dagon himself and given by him to Mankar Cameron. The Mysterium Xarxes. When I walk the earth again, the faithful among you shall receive your reward, to be set above all other mortals forever. As for the rest, the weak shall be winnowed, the timid shall be cast down, the mighty shall tremble at my feet and pray for pardon. The array of letters in the circle is not meant to be read with this text. It is a separate part. Of bold Oblivion fire, who finds you for Lord Dagon, forever reborn in blood and fire from the waters from Oblivion. Second page. Come slow and bring 4 keys. In my first arm, a storm. My second, the rush of plagued rain. The third, the tinder of Anu. The fourth, the very eyes of Padhome. Master akin master, mother is miasma to destroyer. Inside the triangle it says, Mythic Dawn. Reader, this book is your door to that domain. And though you be a destroyer, you must still submit to locks. Lord Dagon would only have those clever enough to pause. All else the Orbis claims in their fool running. Walk first, heed. The impatience you feel is your first slave to behead. Greetings, novitiate, and know first a reassurance. Mankar Cameron was once like you, asleep, unwise, protonymic. We mortals leave the dreaming sleeve of birth the same, unmantled save for the symbiosis with our mothers, thus to practice and thus to rapprochement, until finally we might through new eyes leave our hearths without need or fear that she remains behind. In this moment we destroy her forever and enter the domain of Lord Dagon. Mythic Dawn, Commentaries 1. Enter, as Lord Dagon has written, come slow and bring 4 keys. Know that then you are royalty, a new breed of destroyer, whose garden shall flood with flowers known and unknown, as it was in the mythic dawn. Thus shall you return to your first primal wail, and yet come out different. It shall this time be neonymbiosis, master akin to master, whose mother is miasma. Every quarter has known us, and none bore our passing except with trembling. Perhaps you came to us through war, or study, or shadow, or the alignment of certain snakes. Though each path matters in its kind, the prize is always thus. Welcome, novitiate, that you are here at all means that you have the worthiness of kings. Seek thy pocket now, and look. There is the first key, glinting with the light of a new dawn. Night follows day, and so know that this primary insight shall fall alike unto the turbulent evening sea where all faiths are tested. Again a reassurance. Even the usurper went under the iliac before he rose up to claim his fleet. Fear only for a second. Shaken belief is like water for a purpose. In the garden of the dawn we shall breathe whole realities. Enter, as Lord Dagon has written, come slow and bring 4 keys. Our order is based on the principles of his mighty razor, novitiate, questing knight, chaplain, and master. Let the evil ones burn in its light as if by the excess of our vision. Then shalt our knowledge go aright. However, recall that your sight is yet narrow, and while you have the invitation, you have not the address. My own summons came through a book Lord Dagon wrote himself in the deserts of rust and wounds. Its name is the Mysterium Xarxes, Aldmeritada Aggregate, forefather to the wife of all enigma. Each word is razor-fed and secret, thinner than cataclysms, tarnished like red drink. That I mention it at all is testament to your new rank, my child. Your name is now cut into its weight. Palace, hut, or cave, you have left all the fog worlds of conception behind. Numantia, liberty. Rejoice in the promise of paradise. Endlessly it shall form and reform around you, deeds as entities, all systems only an hour before they bloom to zero sums, flowering like vestments, divine raiment worn to dance at Lord Dagon's golden feet. In his first arm, a storm, his second the rush of plagued rain, the third all the tinder of Anu, and the fourth the very eyes of Padhome. Feel uplifted in thine heart that you have this first key, for it shall strike high and low into the worm rot of false heavens. Roaring I wandered until I grew hoarse with the gospel. I had read the mysteries of Lord Dagon, and feeling anew went mad with the overflow. My words found no purchase until I became hidden. These were not words for the common of Tamriel, whose clergy long ago feigned the very existence of the dawn. Learn from my mistake. Know that humility was Mankar Cameron's original wisdom. Come slow and bring 4 keys. Offering myself to that daybreak allowed the girdle of grace to contain me. When my voice returned, it spoke with another tongue. After 3 nights, I could speak fire, red drink, razor-fed. I had glimpsed the path unto the garden, and knew that to inform others of its harbor, I had to first drown myself in search's sea. Know ye that I have found my fleet, and that you are the flagship of my hope. Greetings, novitiate. Mankar Cameron was once you, asleep, unwise, protonymic, but am no more. Now I sit and wait to feast with thee on all the worlds of this cosmos. Numantia, Liberty. Mythic Dawn, Commentaries 2. Whosoever findeth this document, I call him brother. Answers are liberations, where the slaves of Malbioj that came to know Numantia cast down their jailer king, Maztiak, which the Xarxes Mysterium calls the Arcane. Maztiak, whose carcass was dragged through the streets by his own bone walkers, and whose flesh was opened on rocks thereon, and those angels who loved him no longer did drink from his honeyed ichors, screaming, "Let all know free will and do as they will." Your coming was foretold, my brother, by the Lord Dagon in his Book of Razors. You are to come as idols drop away from you one by one. You are exalted in eyes that have not yet set on you. You, swain to well-traveled to shatterer of mantles. You, brother, are to sit with me in paradise and be released of all unknowns. Indeed, I shall show you his book and its foul and many-feathered rubric, so that you can put into symbols what you already know. The sphere of destruction is but the milk of the unenslaved. I fault not your stumbling, for they are expected and given grace by the oils. I crave not your downfalls, though without them you might surpass me even in the coming earth of all infinities. Lord Dagon wishes you no ills, but the momentous. And as he wants, you must want, and so learn from the pages of God this, the ritual of want. Whisper to earth, where the meddlers take no stones except to blood, as blood is blood, and to the cracking of bone, as bone is bone, and so to crack and answer and fall before the one and one. I call you dragon as brother and king. Hides of druch, 7 and 7, draught of oil, 1 and 1, circles drawn by wet dibolites, 3 concentric, and let their lower blood fall where it may, a birth watched by blackbirds. Hearthfire first. Incant the following when your hearing becomes blurred. Enraptured, he who finally goes unrecorded. Recorded, the slaves that without knowing turn the wheel. Enslaved, all the children of the Orbis as it is. Mythic Dawn, Commentaries 3. The tower touches all the mantles of heaven, brother Noviates, and by its apex one can be as he will. More, be as he was, and yet changed for all else on that path for those that walk after. This is the third key of Numantia, and the secret of how mortals become makers, and makers back to mortals. The bones of the wheel need their flesh, and that is mankind's heirloom. Oath-breakers beware, for their traitors run through the Nimic paths, runner-dogs of prolix gods. The dragon's blood have hidden ascension in 6,000 years of ethereal labyrinth, which is arena, which they yet deny is oath-bound. By the book, take this key and pierce the divine shell that encloses the mantle takers. The skin of gold, Scarab a Arbex, woe to the oath breakers. Of the skin of gold, the Xarxes Mysterium says, be fooled not by the forlorn that ride astray the roadway, for they lost faith, and this losing was caused by the Aedra who would know no other planets. Whereby the words of Lord Dagon instructs us to destroy these faithless. Eat or bleed dry the gone forlorn, and gain that small will that led them to walk the path of Godhead at the first. Spit out or burn to the side that which made them delay. Know them as the Mnemone. Every new limb is paid for by the underknown. See, brother, and give not more to the Hydra. Reader, you will sense a shadow choir soon. The room you are in right now will grow eyes and voices. The candle or spell light you read this by will become gateways for the traitors I have mentioned. Scorn them and fear not. Call them names. Call out their base natures. I, the Mankar of stars, am with you, and I come to take you to my paradise, where the tower traitors shall hang on glass racks until they smile with the new revolution. That is your ward against the Nemoli. They run blue through noise and shine only when the earth trembles with the eruption of the newly mantled. Tell them, go, Gartok al-Mnem, God is come, Numi Mora, Num Dalai Menem. Once you walk in the mythic, it surrenders its power to you. Myth is nothing more than first wants, unutterable truth. Ponder this while searching for the fourth key. Understood laws of the arcanature will fall away like heat. First tower. Dictate. Render the mutant bound where he may do no more harm. As god of the mundus, alike shall be his progeny, split from their divine sparks. We are 8 × 8 exarchs. Let the home of Padme see us as sole exit. Chime. Those who know it can reshape the land. Witness the home of the Red King once jungled. He that enters paradise enters his own mother. Ei alma ruma, the orbis endeth in all ways. Endeth we seek through our dawn, all endeth. Falter now and become one with the wayside orphans that feed me. Follow, and I shall adore you from inside. My first daughter ran from the Dagonite road. Her name was Ruma, and I ate her with no bread, and made another, which learned, and I loved that one, and blackbirds formed her twin behind all time. Starlight is your mantle, brother. Wear it to see by, and add its light to paradise. Mythic Dawn. Commentaries 4. May the holder of the fourth key know the heart thereby. The Mundex terrene was once ruled over solely by the tyrant Drech kings, each to their own dominion, and border wars fought between their slave oceans. They were akin to the time totems of old, yet evil and full of mockery and profane powers. No one that lived did so outside of the sufferance of the Drechs. I give my soul to the Magna G, saith the joyous in paradise, for they created Mehrunes the razor in secret, in the very bowels of Lig, the domain of the upstart who vanishes. Though they came from diverse waters, each get shared sole purpose, to artifice a prince of good, spinning his likeness in random swath, and imbuing him with Oblivion's most precious and scarce asset, hope. Deathlessly I intone from paradise, Mehrunes the thief-taker, Mehrunes God's body, Mehrunes the red arms that went up, Numantia, liberty. Deny not that these days shall come again, my novitiates. For as Mehrunes threw down Lig and cracked his face, declaring each of the 19 and 9 and 9 oceans free, so shall he crack the serpent crown of the Cyrodiils and make federation. All will change in these days as it was changed in those. Forthwith by the magic word Numantia, a great rebellion rose up and pulled down the towers of Kimmel Gargig, and the Templars of the upstart were slaughtered, and blood fell like dew from the upper wards down to the lowest pits, where the slaves with maniacal faces took chains and teeth to their jailers, and all hope was brush fire. Your dawn listens, my lord. Let all the Orbis know itself to be free. Mehrunes is come. There is no dominion save free will. Suns were riven as your red legions moved from Lig to the hinterlands of Chill, a legion for each get, and Kuri was thrown down, and Jaff was thrown down, and Hormagail was crushed with cold salt, and forevermore called Hor, and so shall it be again under the time of gates. Under the mires, Malbioj was thrown down, that old city of chains, slaked in new-bone warmth and set free. Galg and Morgalg were thrown down together in a single night of day, and shall it be again under the time of gates. Nothing but woe for NRN, which has become the pit, and 7 curses on its drog, the Vermai Naimog. But for it the crusades would be as my Lord's creation. Get by the gay, and do as thou wilt, of no fetters but your own conscience. Know that your hell is broken, people of the Orbis, and praise the new Mantia, which is liberty. The Oblivion Crisis. At the turning of the Fourth Age, in the year 3E 433, the Emperor Uriel Septim VII was assassinated and the Amulet of Kings was destroyed. This set in motion a chain of events that would bring down an empire and change forever the relationship between man and the gods. The assassins first attacked the Emperor in the White Gold Tower. While the blades held them back, the Emperor made his way down to the dungeons, to a secret escape route built into one of the prison cells. For reasons known only to himself, the Emperor pardoned the fortunate prisoner in that cell. Some say the prisoner reminded him of a childhood friend. Others say it was a moment of prophecy. Whatever the case, the prisoner came to play a fateful role in the history of the Empire and Tamriel, surely a sign that the gods themselves were at work. The pursuing assassins killed the Blade's bodyguards in a relentless series of sneak attacks. Eventually, they struck down the Emperor himself. Before he fell, Uriel Septim VII gave the Amulet of Kings to the prisoner, who somehow made it out of the imperial sewers and into the light of day. The assassination is now known to have been the work of a group of Daedric cultists known as the Mythic Dawn. Those who still suspect the Dark Brotherhood should consider 2 facts. First, they would have only needed a single assassin, not a small army of them. Second, the Dark Brotherhood would never be so foolish as to effectively declare war on the Empire and thus ensure their complete destruction. Witness to the eventual fate of the Mythic Dawn. The Amulet of Kings next surfaced at the Waynan Priory near Coral. Joffrey, secret Grandmaster of the Blades and head of the Priory, took possession of the amulet. The messenger was set off to Kvatch to find a lowly priest named Martin Septim. Unbeknownst even to himself, Martin was the bastard son of Uriel Septim VII and the last heir to the Ruby Throne. He alone could use the Amulet of Kings to light the dragonfires that wards the barrier between Tamriel and Oblivion and save the world from the Mythic Dawn plot. The prisoner arrived at Kvatch to find it overrun by Daedra that had poured in from a newly opened Oblivion gate, the start of the empire-spanning devastation of the Oblivion Crisis. How the prisoner closed the gate is not recorded. Once closed, Martin and the surviving Kvatch guardsmen drove back the Daedra. Now known as the hero of Kvatch, the prisoner and Martin returned to Waynan Priory, only to find the priory sacked and the amulet taken. Joffrey survived the attack, however, and the 3 of them made their way to Cloud Ruler Temple, bastion of the Blades. This secret fortress in the mountains outside Bruma is where Martin was held safe while the hero of Kvatch searched for the lost amulet. knowing only that a mysterious group called the Mythic Dawn was behind the assassination and thief of the amulet. The hero of Kvatch was sent to locate the cult. With the help of Boris, a blade in service of the Emperor, they somehow used the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes, esoteric works by the madman Mankar Cameron, to direct them to the Mythic Dawn's secret lair. Scholars familiar with the commentaries claim the location is not directly mentioned in them. How they did this remains a mystery. No official records exist of how the hero of Kvatch penetrated the Mythic Dawn's lair near Lake Arius. There is a bardic tale that claims the hero used trickery and disguise, but that is just speculation. What's was discovered there is that Mankar Cameron was behind the Mythic Dawn, and that the group worshipped the Daedric prince, Mehrunes Dagon. Mankar Cameron believed himself to be a direct descendant of the Cameron usurper, the infamous pretender to the throne of Valenwood. Somehow the hero escaped with the Mysterium Xarxes itself, the holy book of the Mythic Dawn cult. Mankar Cameron fled to Oblivion with the Amulet of Kings. With some effort and great risk to his sanity, Martin deciphered the Mysterium Xarxes and intended to use it to open a gateway to Mankar Cameron in order to recover the Amulet of Kings. Before Martin could do the ritual to open the gateway, Mehrunes Dagon opened an Oblivion gate outside Bruma. The hero of Kvatch saved the city and Martin by entering the gate and closing it before a Daedric siege engine could destroy Bruma and the Cloud Ruler Temple. Many songs and stories have been told of this battle, and I will not retell them here. The hero of Kvatch was now known as the savior of Bruma. With the city and Cloud Ruler Temple safe, Martin opened the portal to Mankar Cameron's paradise. The detail of what transpired in this place have not been recorded. All that is known is that the savior of Bruma traveled to this paradise, killed Mankar Cameron, and returned with the Amulet of Kings. With the amulet in hand, Martin Septim presented himself to the Elder Council to be crowned Emperor of all Tamriel. Once crowned, he planned to relight the dragon fires and seal Tamriel from oblivion. In a last-ditch attempt to stop him, Mehrunes Dagon launched an assault on the imperial city, opening several Oblivion gates within the capital itself. Uncrowned, Martin joined the battle in the city streets. Mehrunes Dagon himself left Oblivion and entered Tamriel, breaking the covenant. Only the unlit dragon fires allowed this to be possible. Now that the barrier was ripped asunder, it was too late to relighting the fires. Martin Septim chose to make the ultimate sacrifice. He shattered the Amulet of Kings to become the avatar of the god Akatosh and do battle with Mehrunes Dagon. Records of this battle vary wildly. What we do know is that Mehrunes Dagon was defeated and sent back into Oblivion. The avatar of Akatosh was turned to stone and can be seen to this day in the Temple of the One in the Imperial City. With the amulet gone, the dragon fires quenched, and the last Dragon Blood Emperor dead, the barrier to Oblivion is sealed forever. Epics of Mehrunes Dagon, Volume 1. By High Chronicler Valentine Liore of the Order of the Waking Flame. The exalted and most puissant Lord does not approve of the tales contained within this book. It is a vulgarity that they must be written, as all who have heard of the Prince of Ambition should know that he is the rightful ruler of all the realms. No other Daedric prince has the capacity to match his mercurial power. No other prince has the mental fortitude to guide and cleanse the plains as judiciously as the Master of Razors. No other Daedric prince can compare to the glory of Mehrunes Dagon. For the crime of committing these tales of his glory to the printed page, I will submit myself to the flames of his anger after I have completed the work. To demonstrate Mehrunes Dagon's devotion to bargains and the deeds of his strength, I first recount the tale of the Lord of Flood and Fire and the enchanter Arabath. Arabath summoned the flame tyrant to lend his dominion over change to the unveiling of her greatest ritual. She gathered the necessary components, offerings of nature and the creations of mortals alike, while Dagon was asked to ensure that the wards would contain his might and oversee the formation of the magic. Arabath, in presenting the bargain to Dagon, spoke the words, "You are responsible for my safety in this matter," to which he agreed. When all was set, Arabath drew her designs in the sand before the ocean and called upon the power of the waves to assist in bringing dead and blighted trees to life. The waters receded as her ritual drew more power from the waters than Arabath expected. She could only stare in fright at the mountainous waves speeding toward her from the depths of the ocean itself. Dagon, remembering the bargain, quickly unleashed a spell of his own that matched the ocean's power. Flames swelled up higher than the oncoming wave and turned the rushing water to steam. Arabath found herself unharmed on the beach in a swatch of burned forest and steaming tide pools. A season later, all the blighted trees grew healthy branches and prospered. Such is the glory of Mehrunes Dagon's might and his devotion to the bargains he makes. The Prince of Change is known for taking his fee in blood and pain. All those who deal with him know that this world is one where pain and suffering are constants. They have moved past the shock of mortal peril. But Mehrunes Dagon does not back out of bargains either. Be smart and resourceful in your dealings with the prince, and he will treat you in kind. Epics of Mehrunes Dagon, Volume 2. Since the last volume of this book did not result in my immediate death, though for the arrogance of transcribing the works of our puissant lord my life should have been forfeit, I have decided to recount more tales of Mehrunes Dagon. Should these written works fail to inspire or displease the machinations of the Prince of Destruction, I will once again willingly surrender to the flames of his anger when called upon to do so. May Lord Dagon show no mercy in my eventual punishment. Let us now turn to Mehrunes Dagon's incredible prowess in battle. There are a multitude of tales that inspire no shortage of reverence for the Lord of Flood and Fire's skill. Mournhold's people remember the destruction they suffered after becoming the focal point of Lord Dagon's wrath. Instead of recounting famous past victories and harping on the well-known stratagems of our prince, I will recount a new tale, one of battle, blood, and victory. A tale where Dagon rose in fearsome combat and freed his loyal subjects from the enslavement of Molag Bal. Deep in the recesses of Cold Harbor, a group of true believers toiled away under the watchful eye of their Daedric overseers. Their every waking moment was filled with pain and suffering, but still they knew Mehrunes Dagon was with them. They drew on the warmth of his fire and burned with the desire to enact destructive change upon their captors. None of this group of devout and far-seeing mortals expected to leave Cold Harbor, but they knew that they could carry out incredible feats of sabotage and carnage if only given the opportunity. So they whiled away their time, scheming, praying to the Prince of Blood and Destruction, and waiting for the moment to strike. Some of the group lost faith, their resolve crumbling like hollow seashells. Others, however, the most righteous of the group, held fast to their convictions. For their determination and devotion, they were gifted with an incredible explosion, a feat of magic that sent spasms through the ground and rattled the implements of pain out of their overseers' hands. The group leaped forward as one. Flames rose in the wake of their attack, and other prisoners, seeing the success one devoted group could have against the bringers of pain, rose to join them. Above the mortals, looming over the heads of the Daedra and the mountains of Cold Harbor, was the father of Cataclysm. Dagon swung his blades, arms blurring together with the speed and finesse of each strike. Molag Bal's fiendish tail whipped across the ground, swatting away mortals and minions in his frustration. The princes clashed, each blow struck, sending ear-shattering thunderclaps throughout the realm. Eventually, it seemed as though Molag Bal would be victorious. The harvester of souls reared his goatish head and let loose a furious bray. For a second, everything fell quiet. The skirmishes on the ground ended with the enslaved lying among their Daedric overseers, hands clamped to their bleeding ears. Some unfortunate creatures nearest to where the princes fought lay among the rubble, their bodies broken by the power of that bray. But Dagon's true believers were not among the fallen. Instead, they opened their eyes to the heat of the Deadlands. Not only had the most exalted one freed them from the clutches of Molag Bal, but he accomplished it while fighting a Daedric prince using only a projection of himself. And that is why we follow the Prince of Destruction. The Rise of the Thalmor. Author's note. Much of what is written in this book is pieced together from documents captured from the enemy during the war, interrogation of prisoners, and eyewitness accounts from surviving soldiers and imperial officers. I myself commanded the 10th Legion in Hammerfell and Cyrodiil until I was wounded in 175 during the assault on the imperial city. That said, the full truth of some events may never be known. I have done my best to fill in the gaps with educated conjectures based on my experience as well as my hard-earned knowledge of the enemy. Although it is not well known, Somerset Isle suffered from the Oblivion crisis as much as Cyrodiil did. The elves made war upon the Oblivion invaders, occasionally even crossing over to close down Oblivion gates. As a nation, they had more successes than Cyrodiil did, although the limitless Daedric hordes made the outcome a foregone conclusion. The Thalmor had always been a powerful faction within Somerset Isle, but had also always been a minority voice. During the crisis, the Crystal Tower was forced to give the Thalmor greater power and authority. Their efforts almost certainly saved Somerset Isle from being overrun. They capitalized on their success to seize total control in 4E22. They renamed the nation Alinor, which harkens back to an earlier age before the ascendancy of man. Most people outside of the Aldmeri Dominion still call it Somerset Isle, either out of peevishness or ignorance. In 4E29, the government of Valenwood was overthrown by Thalmor collaborators and a union with Alinor proclaimed. It appears that Thalmor agents had formed close ties to certain Bosmeri factions even before the Oblivion crisis. The Empire and its Bosmer allies, caught completely off guard, were quickly defeated by the much better prepared Altmer forces that invaded Valenwood on the heels of the coup. Thus was the Aldmeri Dominion reborn. Shortly afterward, the Aldmeri Dominion severed all contact with the Empire. For 70 years they were silent. Most scholars believe there was some sort of internal strife in Alinor, but very little is known of the factional struggles that went on inside the Dominion, while the Thalmor consolidated its power in Somerset and Valenwood. In 4E98, the two moons, Maser and Secunda, vanished. Within most of the Empire, this was viewed with trepidation and fear. In elsewhere, it was far worse. Culturally, the moons are much more influential to the Khajiit. After 2 years of the Void Nights, the moons returned. The Thalmor announced that they had restored the moons using previously unknown dawn magics, but it is unclear if they truly restored the moons or just took advantage of foreknowledge that they would return. Regardless of the truth of the matter, the Khajiit credited the Thalmor as their saviors. Within 15 years, imperial influence in elsewhere had so diminished that the Empire was unable to respond effectively to the coup of 4E115, which dissolved the Elsewhere Confederacy and recreated the ancient kingdoms of Anaquina and Palatine as client states of the Aldmeri Dominion. Once more, the Empire failed to stop the advance of Thalmor sick power. When Titus Mede II ascended the throne in 468, he inherited a weakened empire. The glory days of the Septums were a distant memory. Valenwood and elsewhere were gone, ceded to the Thalmor enemy. Blackmarsh had been lost to imperial rule since the aftermath of the Oblivion crisis. Morrowind had never recovered fully from the eruption of Mount Vardenfell. Hammerfell was plagued by infighting between crowns and forebears. Only High Rock, Cyrodiil, and Skyrim remained prosperous and peaceful. Emperor Titus Mede had only a few short years to consolidate his rule before his leadership was put to the ultimate test. The war begins. On the 30th of Frostfall, 4E171, the Aldmeri Dominion sent an ambassador to the imperial city with a gift in a covered cart and an ultimatum for the new emperor. The long list of demands included staggering tributes, disbandment of the Blades, outlawing the worship of Talos, and ceding large sections of Hammerfell to the Dominion. Despite the warnings of his generals of the Empire's military weakness, Emperor Titus Mede II rejected the ultimatum. The Thalmor ambassador upended the cart, spilling over 100 heads on the floor, every Blades agent in Somerset and Valenwood. And so began the Great War, which would consume the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion for the next 5 years. Within days, Aldmeri armies invaded Hammerfell and Cyrodiil simultaneously. A strong force commanded by the Thalmor general Lord Narafin attacked Cyrodiil from the south, marching out of hidden camps in northern Elsewhere and flanking the imperial defenses along the Valenwood border. Leawin soon fell to the invaders, while Bravil was cut off and besieged. At the same time, an Aldmeri army under Lady Aranelia crossed into western Cyrodiil from Valenwood, bypassing Anvil and Kvatch and crossing into Hammerfell. Smaller Aldmeri forces landed along the southern coastline of Hammerfell. The disunited Red Guard forces offered only scattered resistance to the invaders, and much of the southern coastline was quickly overrun. The greatly outnumbered Imperial legions retreated across the Alakar Desert in the now famous March of Thirst. 4E172-173, the Aldmeri advance into Cyrodiil. It appears now that the initial Aldmeri objective was in fact the conquest of Hammerfell, and that the invasion of Cyrodiil was intended only to pin down the Imperial legions while Hammerfell was overrun. However, the surprising initial success of Lord Narafin's attack led the Thalmor to believe that the Empire was weaker than they had thought. The capture of the Imperial city itself and the complete overthrow of the Empire thus became their primary objective of the next 2 years. As we know, the Thalmor nearly achieved their objective. It was only because of our Emperor's determined leadership during the Empire's darkest hour that this disaster was averted. During 4E172, the Aldmeri advanced deeper into Cyrodiil. Bravil and Anvil both fell to the invaders. By the end of the year, Lord Narifin had advanced to the very walls of the Imperial city. There were fierce naval clashes in Lake Rumara and along the Niben as the Imperial forces attempted to hold the eastern bank. In Hammerfell, the Thalmor were content to consolidate their gains as they took control of the whole southern coastline, which was in fact their stated objective in the ultimatum delivered to the Emperor. Of the southern cities, only Hagathi still held out. The survivors of the March of Thirst regrouped in northern Hammerfell, joined by reinforcements from High Rock. The year 473 saw stiffening Imperial resistance in Cyrodiil, but the seemingly inexorable Aldmeri advance continued. Fresh legions from Skyrim bolstered the Emperor's main army in the Imperial city, but the Aldmeri forced the crossing of the Niben and began advancing in force up the eastern bank. By the end of the year, the Imperial city was surrounded on 3 sides. Only the northern supply route to Bruma remained open. In Hammerfell, Imperial fortunes took a turn for the better. In early 4E173, a forebear army from Sentinel broke the siege of Hagatha, a crown city, leading to the reconciliation of the 2 factions. Despite this, Lady Aranelia's main army succeeded in crossing the Alakar Desert. The Imperial legions under General Decianus met them outside Skaven in a bloody and indecisive clash. Decianus withdrew and left Aranelia in possession of Skaven, but the Aldmeri were too weakened to continue their advance. 4E174, the sack of the Imperial city. In 4E174, the Thalmor leadership committed all available forces to the campaign in Cyrodiil, gambling on a decisive victory to end the war once and for all. During the spring, Aldmeri reinforcements gathered in southern Cyrodiil, and on the 12th of Second Seed, they launched a massive assault on the Imperial city itself. One army drove north to completely surround the city, while Lord Narafin's main force attacked the walls from the south, east, and west. The Emperor's decision to fight his way out of the city rather than make a last stand was a bold one. No general dared advise him to abandon the capital, but Titus II was proven right in the end. While the 8th Legion fought a desperate and doomed rearguard action on the walls of the city, Titus the Town broke out of the city to the north with his main army, smashing through the surrounding the Aldmeri sick forces and linking up with reinforcements marching south from Skyrim under General Jonna. Meanwhile, however, the capital fell to the invaders and the infamous sack of the Imperial city began. The imperial palace was burned, the white gold tower itself looted, and all manner of atrocities carried out by the vengeful elves on the innocent populace. In Hammerfell, General Decianus was preparing to drive the Aldmeri back from Skaven when he was ordered to march for Cyrodiil. Unwilling to abandon Hammerfell completely, he allowed a great number of invalids to be discharged from the legions before they marched east. These veterans formed the core of the army that eventually drove Lady Aranelia's forces back across the Alik'r late in 174, taking heavy losses on their retreat from harassing attacks by the Alik'r warriors. 4E175, the Battle of the Red Ring. During the winter of 4E174 to 1705, the Thalmor seem to have believed that the war in Cyrodiil was all but over. They made several attempts to negotiate with Titus II. The emperor encouraged them in their belief that he was preparing to surrender. Meanwhile, he gathered his forces to retake the imperial city. In what is now known as the Battle of the Red Ring, a battle that will serve as a model for imperial strategists for generations to come, Titus II divided his forces into three. One army, with the legions from Hammerfell under General Decianus, was hidden in the Colovian highlands near Coral. The Aldmeri were unaware that he was no longer in Hammerfell, possibly because the imperial veterans Decianus had left behind led Lady Aranelia to believe that she still faced an imperial army. The second army, largely of Nord legions under General Jonna, took up position near Cheydinhal. The main army was commanded by the emperor himself and would undertake the main assault of the imperial city from the north. On the 30th of Rain's Hand, the bloody Battle of the Red Ring began as General Decianus swept down on the city from the west, while General Jonna's legionnaires drove south along the Red Ring Road. In a two-day assault, Jonna's army crossed the Niben and advanced west, attempting to link up with Decianus's legions and thus surround the imperial city. Lord Narifin was taken by surprise by Decianus's assault, but Jonna's troops faced bitter resistance as the Aldmeri counterattacked from Bravil and Skingrad. The heroic Nord legionnaires held firm, however, beating off the piecemeal Aldmeri attacks. By the fifth day of the battle, the Aldmeri army in the imperial city was surrounded. Titus II led the assault from the north, personally capturing Lord Narifin. It is rumored the emperor wielded the famed sword Goldbrand, although this has never been officially confirmed by the imperial government. An attempt by the Aldmeri to break out of the city to the south was blocked by the unbreakable shield wall of General Jonna's battered legions. In the end, the main Aldmeri army in Cyrodiil was completely destroyed. The emperor's decision to withdraw from the imperial city in 4E174 was bloodily vindicated. Lord Narifin was kept alive for 33 days, hanging from the white gold tower. It is not recorded where his body was buried, if it was buried at all. One source claims he was carried off by a winged Daedra on the 34th day. The White Gold Concordat and the End of the War. Although victorious, the imperial armies were in no shape to continue the war. The entire remaining imperial force was gathered in Cyrodiil, exhausted and decimated by the Battle of the Red Ring. Not a single legion had more than half its soldiers fit for duty. 2 legions had been effectively annihilated, not counting the loss of the 8th during the retreat from the imperial city the previous year. Titus II knew that there would be no better time to negotiate peace. and late in 475, the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion signed the White Gold Concordat, ending the Great War. The terms were harsh, but Titus II believed that it was necessary to secure peace and give the empire a chance to regain its strength. The two most controversial terms of the Concordat were the banning of the worship of Talos and the cession of a large section of southern Hammerfell, most of what was already occupied by Aldmeri forces. Critics have pointed out that the Concordat is almost identical to the ultimatum the Emperor rejected 5 years earlier. However, there is a great difference between agreeing to such terms under the mere threat of war and agreeing to them at the end of a long and destructive war. No part of the empire would have accepted these terms in 471, dictated by the Thalmor at Sword's Point. Titus II would have faced civil war. By 4E175, most of the empire welcomed peace at almost any price. Epilogue: Hammerfell fights on alone. Hammerfell, however, refused to accept the White Gold Concordat, being unwilling to concede defeat and the loss of so much of their territory. Titus II was forced to officially renounce Hammerfell as an imperial province in order to preserve the hard-won peace treaty. The Red Guards, understandably, looked on this as a betrayal. In this, the Thalmor certainly achieved one of their long-term goals by sowing lasting bitterness between Hammerfell and the Empire. In the end, the heroic Red Guards fought the Aldmeri Dominion to a standstill, although the war lasted for 5 more years and left southern Hammerfell devastated. The Red Guards say that this proves that the White Gold Concordat was unnecessary, and that if Titus II had kept his nerve, the Aldmeri could have been truly defeated by the combined forces of Hammerfell and the rest of the Empire. The truth of that assertion can, of course, never be known. But the Red Guards should not forget the great sacrifice of imperial blood, Breton, Nord, and Cyrodiilic, at the Battle of the Red Ring that weakened the Dominion enough to allow the eventual Second Treaty of Stros-Mackay in 480 and the withdrawal of Aldmeri forces from Hammerfell. There can be no doubt that the current peace cannot last forever. The Thalmor take the long view, as is proved by the sequence of events leading up to the Great War. All those who value freedom over tyranny can only hope that before it is too late, Hammerfell and the Empire will be reconciled and stand united against the Thalmor threat. Otherwise, any hope to stem the tide of Thalmor rule over all of Tamriel is dimmed. The Rising Threat, Volume 1. The following is the account of Lathanil of Sunhold, an Altmer refugee from Somerset Isle, who came to Cyrodiil in the early years of the Fourth Era. According to Lathanil, he did not flee the aftermath of the Oblivion crisis in Somerset. Rather, he fled the darkening shadow of the Thalmor upon my beloved homeland. Lathanil had a very intense presence, to put it politely, and some of his accusations of Thalmor involvement border on madness. This may be why his fervent warnings and outspoken criticisms of the Thalmor and the Aldmeri Dominion went unheeded, but history has at least partially vindicated Lathanil's claims. Praxis era tuum, imperial historian. I was barely more than a child when the great anguish fell upon us. The very air was torn asunder, leaving gaping, infected wounds that spewed Daedra from the bowels of Oblivion. Many flocked to the shores, seeking escape from Dagon's murderous host. But the seas betrayed our people, raising up to smash our ships and our ports, leaving us to fates so vile and wicked that death would seem a mercy. The Crystal Tower stood as our last bastion of hope in both the literal and figurative sense. Refugees filled the Crystal Tower until it could hold no more. I could taste the fear hanging in the air, feel the pall of despair suffocating us. We could see the Daedra moving through the trees in the distance, but they did not come. Days passed, and still the Daedra would not approach within arrow shot of the battlements. Hope began to grow. They fear us, some would say. Even a Daedra knows not to trifle with the wisdom and magics of the crystal-like law. It was as if the foul denizens of Oblivion had been waiting for this very spirit to stoke our hearts before they acted. As we slept, innumerable legions of Daedra amassed around us, and they were not alone. Hundreds of Altmer prisoners were gathered with them. As dawn broke, we were awoken by their screams as the Daedra began to flail them and flay them. We watched in abject horror as our kinfolk were defiled completely, carved up and eaten alive, impaled on their depraved war machines, and worried apart as meals for their profane beasts. This bloodletting was only a prelude to whet their appetites. Once the Daedra finished with our kinfolk, they turned their eyes to the Crystal Tower. Our great and noble bastion proved as much of an impediment as a mighty oak to a landslide, standing tall for but a few moments, appearing almost able to ride the tide of destruction around it, but ultimately being swept away. Our exalted wizards decimated the fiends, roasting them by the dozens. Archers were finding the narrowest of chinks in their Daedric armor at over 100 paces, felling their captains and commanders. The might and skillfulness of our heroic defenders was astonishing to behold, but it was not enough. The Daedra clambered over the corpses of their cohort. They marched headlong into death and destruction that would make the mightiest armies in all of Tamriel quake with fear. When they breached the walls, I fled along with the other cowards. I take no pride in that act. It has haunted my existence ever since, and I burn with shame to admit it, but it is truth. We fled in mindless panic, abandoning those stalwart Altmer who held the line against the onslaught to preserve and defend our illustrious Crystal Tower. We raced through cleverly concealed passageways and emerged well away from the chaos that had descended upon the tower. That is when it happened. It started like a gust rustling through the leaves of a dense forest, but the sound did not taper off. It rose into a roar as the very ground on which I stood began to shudder. I turned to look, and the world held its breath. I stood transfixed as the heart of my homeland was torn as if from my own breast. The unthinkable, the incomprehensible, the tower of crystal-like law cast to the ground with all the dignity of a beggar meeting an ironclad fist. An eternity I watched, trying to reconcile what I knew with what I saw. Sobs racked my chest, and weeping filled the air around me as the spell loosened its hold and I realized where I was. There were scores of other refugees mesmerized by the horror that had likewise ensorcelled me. "Go," I croaked out as my heart, the heart of my land, shattered. No one moved, not even me. I mustered what will I could and bellowed all the fear and hatred and agony at what had just happened, turning the word into a mindless shriek. "Go!" I ran then, feeling more than seeing that the others had followed. The Rising Threat, Volume 2. What happened after the Tower of Crystal-like Law fell was a daze. It was as if my mind simply stopped. Instinct took over as my every thought sank into a black abyss of despair. Time lost all meaning, and to this day I know not how long I was in this state. Eventually, a conscious thought managed to break my fugue. The Daedric horde had vanished, gone as suddenly as they had come. Before my numbed mind could comprehend the tumult that consumed my beloved Somerset Isle, before I could formulate the question, how, they were there, dripping honeyed poison in our ears. The Thalmor. They were the ones that saved us, they claimed, working deep and subtle magics. It was their efforts, their sacrifices that delivered the Altmer from extinction. Oh, what fools we were. We wanted so desperately someone to thank for ending our tribulations. We lavished it upon the first to step up and claim the glory. With that simple act of gratitude, we allowed a vile rot to seep into our homeland, to putrefy our once noble and distinguished civilization. It was months before I began to suspect the error we had made. Small twinges of unease would vex me, but each one alone was easy enough to disregard and push aside. The exile of the great seer mage Rhinandor the Bold was the final doubt that I could not ignore. You see, Rhinandor was one of the very few who survived the collapse of the Crystal Tower. I saw some of his bravery and heroics with my own eyes. It was his leadership and sorcery that made the Daedra pay such a high price for their destruction of the Crystal Tower. The Thalmor besmirched his name when he had the audacity to publicly doubt and question their role in ending the Oblivion crisis on Somerset Isle. Rhinandor made the mistake of ignoring the consensus gentium, trusting instead to logic and facts. The shrewdness of the Thalmor, however, was not such to allow something as trivial as the truth stand in their way. As soon as they shifted the collective opinion ever so slightly against Rhinandor, they had him sequestered and intensified their efforts to tarnish his reputation. Unable to mount any sort of defense to the Thalmor's attacks, Rhinandor was quickly denounced and exiled. The Rising Threat, Volume 3. Ever so cautiously, I formed a cabal made up of others who distrusted the motives and methods of the Thalmor. Over several months, I liquidated my ancestral holdings and took whatever inheritance I could without raising any suspicions. I would follow after Rhinandor and help him restore his reputation and status. We would then return to best the Thalmor at their own game and win back the mores and morals of the Altmer. The rest of my cabal would stay on Somerset Isle and win the trust of the Thalmor on whatever level best suited each of them, sending clandestine missives to me when possible. After weeks of painstaking investigations and exorbitant bribes, I was able to learn that Rhinandor was placed on a ship to Anvil. I booked my own passage to Anvil. My search almost ended there, for Rhinandor had never arrived in Anvil Harbor. My instinct that Rhinandor met a duplicitous end was confirmed when I sought out several of the deckhands who were reported to be aboard Rhinandor's vessel. All died under mysterious and violent circumstances. The first of many attempts on my life occurred soon after. Needless to say, I survived, but my grand plan to stymie the Thalmor fell apart without an esteemed leader to rally behind. I went into hiding, waiting anxiously for word of the Thalmor's activities back on Somerset Isle. Over the following years, I tried to bend the ear of the Empire through various avenues and warn them of the Thalmor's doings. The Empire, however, was having enough troubles dealing with the aftermath of the Oblivion crisis within its own borders without seeking trouble in faraway Somerset. With the assassination of Emperor Uriel Septim VII and his heirs, and the self-sacrifice of Martin Septim, the true savior of Somerset Isle and the rest of Tamriel, the Empire's leadership was left defunct. High Chancellor Okato convened the full Elder Council in an unsuccessful bid to select a new emperor. Without an emperor, the empire beyond the reach of Cyrodiil began to splinter. Okato reluctantly agreed to become the potentate under the terms of the Elder Council Charter until imperial rule could be re-established, but a reluctant leader is rarely a strong leader. Potentate Okato made admirable efforts to rein in the bedlam that threatened to rip the empire apart, and was even making headway when the Red Mountain erupted and destroyed much of Vardenfell, likely from Thalmor tampering, but have yet to find proof of their misdeeds in this. What was left of Morrowind was thrown into absolute chaos. The effects of the eruption were felt even in Black Marsh, destroying roads and cutting off the Imperial garrisons there. The Rising Threat, Volume 4. While Morrowind and the Imperial forces in Black Marsh were still reeling from the consecutive catastrophes of the Oblivion crisis and the destruction of Vardenfell, the Thalmor incited the Argonians to mount a massive uprising. Black Marsh and southern Morrowind were completely lost to the Argonians, but luckily the Thalmor too lost what influence they had over the Reptilians. All the while, the Thalmor consolidated their hold over my beloved homeland. It took almost a decade before my own machinations put me into contact with Okato. He seemed more interested than most in what I had to say about the Thalmor, maybe because he was himself an Altmer and recognized the threat they represented. It wasn't long before the Thalmor had Okato assassinated. Potentate Okato's murder began the Stormcrown interregnum. The Elder Council fractured, leading into years of ruthless infighting, plots, and backstabbing. Many tried to claim the Ruby Throne. Most were pretenders to the crown. A few had legitimate claims. Others still were little more than brutal dullards who thought mere strength of arms was all the entitlement they needed. Violent, unnatural storms lashed the Imperial city several times during this anarchy, always with the eye of the storm looking directly down upon White Gold Tower, as if this was the judgment of the 9 divines. With the Empire submerged in this mayhem, the Thalmor were quick to act. They overthrew the rightful kings and queens of the Altmer. I remember the revulsion and horror that took hold when word reached me that this dementia had gripped my homeland. Once so proud and majestic, many of our great race actually embraced this insanity. Then the first of many pogroms descended on Somerset Isle. They slaughtered any who were not of the blood of the Altmer, a fine excuse to purge the dissidents as well. The Thalmor have never been ones to waste such an opportunity. After 7 long bloody years, the Stormcrown interregnum was ended when a Colovian warlord by the name of Titus Mede seized the crown. Whether he had rightful claim or not is moot. Without Titus Mede, there would not be an empire today. He proved a shrewd and capable leader, such that Skyrim endorsed him as emperor. With the empire stabilizing under the auspicious efforts of Emperor Titus Mede, I resumed my efforts to warn them of the Thalmor threat. Again, the Thalmor remained a step ahead. Before my efforts could come to fruition, the Thalmor struck. Another coup, this time in Valenwood. The Empire was not prepared for the Thalmor's subterfuge and stratagem. There are those who claim the combined Altmer and Bosmer forces greatly outmatched the Empire, but this is a farce. This short, savage campaign was won by the Thalmor even before first blood was drawn. They waited and watched their enemy. They chose where and when they would attack. The Thalmor were able to bring the full fury of their small contingent of Altmer and Bosmer to any of the several imperial strongholds. Contrary to the posturing of the Empire's generals, the Thalmor did not command greater numbers. They had better spies and greater mobility, and knew how best to use them. This is the menace that the Thalmor represent. They are cruel and merciless, but they are no fools. They are devious and subtle, and so very patient. In one fell stroke, the Thalmor took a strategic foothold on the mainland of Tamriel and prevented any significant attempt the Empire could have made to invade Somerset Isle and depose the tyranny of the Thalmor. At the same time, they took a better vantage to continue to watch the Empire and wait. In so doing, they also revived the Aldmeri Dominion with their alliance to the Bosmer of Valenwood. Over the decades, the Thalmor have grown quiet, but this is not the end. It has only just begun. They merely consolidate their power and tighten their grip on the hearts and minds of the Altmer. The Empire may wish to forget the wounds its pride has suffered at the hands of the Thalmor, but they are still out there, plotting, watching, waiting. While the Empire is content to secure inconsequential corners of its vast holdings, the threat of the Thalmor continues to rise. Not since Potentate Okato has anyone in the Empire listened to me. I beseech any and all citizens of this renowned empire to heed my words. The Thalmor must be stopped before it is too late. Soon after, Lathanul of Sunhold commissioned to have these volumes printed and distributed far and wide in the empire with his own coin, he himself met a violent end. In light of the events that followed his death, we must consider that he may very well have been murdered by Thalmor assassins. As the last pages turn and the fire dims to gentle embers, we're left with a quiet understanding of a time in Tamriel defined by upheaval, ambition, and the resilience that follows. This series of texts, taken together, does more than recount a crisis. It traces the arc of consequence. From the whispered warnings of the House of Troubles to the bold proclamations of the Mysterium Xarxes, we've seen how belief, when twisted by desperation, can tear open the very fabric of reality. We walked alongside cultists and kings, Daedra and emperors, watching as a single moment, the breaking of the Amulet of Kings sent tremors through all of Nirn. And yet, even as the gates of Oblivion opened and cities burned, the stories did not end in fire. They continued in the treaties of the Great War, in the quiet maneuvers of the Thalmor, and in the personal reckonings of those still haunted by what was lost. These books do not promise resolution, but they remind us that Tamriel is a place shaped not only by cataclysm, but by memory, by story, and by the simple act of surviving what came before. So rest now, if you'd like. Let the flicker of these histories settle, and know that somewhere beyond the page, the world endures, just a little changed and still unfolding.